The first scent that drifted into Jonah Martin's senses was the harsh bite of formaldehyde, as familiar as an old acquaintance, yet persistently unwelcome. The twilight town of Maran, a mere collection of weather-beaten houses and quiet streets in the heart of Iowa, had never smelled of death before. Jonah had chosen to retire here, leaving his past as a police detective behind in the sprawling metropolis. Now he found the quaint calmness intertwined with the acidic whiff of his new case, a morgue. How fitting. The morgue was a silent monolith at the end of a row of modest buildings, their paint peeled by the biting winter wind. Its visage, a ghostly pale under the waning moonlight, stood stark against the backdrop of normalcy. He stepped inside, the door creaking in time with his aging joints. A gust of cold air welcomed him into the gloomy interior. The interior was no warmer than the frost-laden town outside, the chill amplifying the hollow echo of his footsteps. Rows of gurneys lined the walls, draped with white sheets, anonymous in death. He thought of the bodies beneath, the stories they could no longer tell, their final chapter written in the sterile language of autopsy reports. "I was beginning to think you were a no-show," a voice cut through the icy silence, carrying a hint of impatience. The town's coroner, Alvin Reeves, emerged from the shadows. His once white lab coat was smeared with the unpalatable stains of his profession. Jonah looked at the man, his eyes gray, hardened, mirroring the steel of the tables he worked upon. "Sorry, I lost track of time," Jonah replied, glancing at his wristwatch. "The case files, I presume?" he asked, extending a gloved hand towards a pile of folders on the nearest table. Reeves nodded, his gaze unfocused. "Strange things, Detective," he muttered. "The dead don't lie, they say, but these ones, they tell a tale I'm not sure I want to hear." Jonah frowned, his curiosity piqued. He opened a file, his eyes skimming over its contents. "How so?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, suppressing the dread creeping into his mind. "Look at the numbers, Detective, and where they are headed." "It doesn't add up," Reeves said cryptically, leaving Jonah to piece together the mystery. The night stretched on. He was a seasoned detective. He could read the tale the numbers spun. The town had an unremarkably stable mortality rate, but the bodies for scientific research were far too many. And the recipients, institutions he had never heard of, cryptic names that returned nothing on a quick search of his phone. His instincts tingled. Something wasn't right. As he exited the morgue, he glanced back at the white monolith. He was too familiar with death to fear it, but something was different here. The smell of formaldehyde lingered in his nostrils, a portent of a dark mystery that needed solving. He knew as he turned away that he would be back, drawn by an insatiable desire to uncover the truth. For now, he had the chilling numbers and the anxious echo of the coroner's words to ponder over. Tomorrow, he knew his investigation would truly begin. Marion slept around him, blissfully unaware of the secrets he had begun to unearth. Little did the town know it was about to be stirred from its dream, the silence to be replaced by whispers of a dread yet unknown. He drove away, the morgue shrinking in his rearview mirror, a silent sentinel of the morbid mystery that lay ahead. Daylight crept in reluctantly upon Marion, painting its quaint architecture in shades of gray. Jonah awoke, his thoughts already entangled with the enigma of the morgue. He found himself rooted at his kitchen table, black coffee untouched, eyes staring but unseeing. The cryptic numbers, the obscure recipients of the bodies, they played on repeat in the theater of his mind. In his previous life as a police detective, he had mastered the art of observation. He was no stranger to the subtleties of human behavior, the tells that people unknowingly displayed. Marion had been a solace, its simplicity a balm to his anxiety-ridden nerves. Now, as he navigated the quiet streets, he noticed a change. The town was not as he remembered, or perhaps not as he wished it to remain. Strolling through Marion's heart, he watched the residents shuffle along their daily routines. Their smiles, previously genuine, now seemed strained, their eyes reflecting a hollowness that echoed within him. Conversations once filled with the banality of small-town life were hushed, their words indistinct. He visited Holly's Diner, a local hub of chatter and cherry pie. "Morning, Jonah," greeted Holly, her voice strained in its cheeriness. There was an unusual reserve in her eyes, a fear that hadn't been there before. "Morning, Holly. The usual, please," he said, attempting a casual tone. He observed her as she prepared his order, her hands trembling ever so slightly, her gaze averted. "A lot of funerals lately," she commented, handing him a cup of coffee. Her words hung in the air, an unsolicited confirmation of his unease. "I've noticed," Jonah replied, his gaze meeting hers. Her eyes, usually bright with friendly chatter, held an unspoken dread. The day wore on. He meandered through Marion, his investigative gaze catching the minute changes. People hurried their steps, their friendly nods brief, their conversations shrouded in an uncomfortable silence. Retreating to his home office, he spread out the morgue files across his desk. A single lamplight cast long shadows around the room, mimicking the unease that gripped him. He noted the pattern again, the unusual frequency of bodies shipped out, the cryptic organizations receiving them. A chill coursed through him, matching the cold logic piecing together an ominous puzzle. Before he called it a night, he decided to take another look at the morgue. He stood across the street from the building, its cold, indifferent exterior staring back at him. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Reeves, the coroner, was hurriedly leaving the building, his face ashen. He observed his hasty departure, a grim intuition gnawing at him. The morgue was no longer just a whisper in the dark. It was now a scream echoing in his mind. He realized that the calm town of Marion was beginning to unravel, its secrets clawing their way to the surface. The morgue, the epicenter of this uncanny disturbance, awaited him. It was no longer a question of if he would go back, but when. He knew that tomorrow would bring him closer to the ghastly truth, the facade of normalcy peeling away to reveal a tale of cosmic horror in the making. His quiet town was changing, and so was he, caught in the web of a sinister mystery he could not ignore. The dawn struggled to break through the heavy curtain of clouds that hung over Marion. Jonah greeted the new day with a sense of resigned determination, the spectral puzzle pieces of the morgue becoming impossible to ignore. He navigated the town, trying to keep his demeanor as unchanging as the weathered buildings around him. The strain, however, was beginning to show, not just in him, but in the townspeople. Their smiles had vanished, replaced by a look of terrified bewilderment that mirrored his own. At the local diner, Holly greeted him with a vacant stare. Her cheer had faded, replaced by an anxious tremor in her hands. "Coffee, Jonah?" she asked, her voice a ghostly echo of its former vibrancy. "Thank you, Holly," he replied, looking into her hollow eyes. "I have noticed something's off with everyone. Can you tell me what's going on?" She hesitated, her gaze shifting nervously. I'm not sure, Jonah. It's as if something is in the air. Like a sense of, I don't know, dread." He nodded, nursing his coffee in silent contemplation. He knew all too well about the dread she spoke of. It was in the quiet whispers of the town, in the evasive gaze of its people, and in the morbid secret he was gradually uncovering. The town he'd come to call home was transforming before his eyes. The streets that once echoed with neighborly chatter now murmured with nervous anticipation. The more he investigated, the more the town seemed to be closing in on itself, a shell clamping down on a terrible secret. His thoughts led him back to the morgue, the epicenter of this growing enigma. In the cold light of day, the building seemed to pulsate with an alien rhythm, its secrets locked behind the unremarkable facade. A trip to the public records office confirmed his suspicions. The documents he unearthed hinted at a history of unusual happenings around the morgue. Old tales of residents who spoke of eerie sights, cryptic symbols etched into the ground, and inexplicable events that were hastily covered up. The further he delved into the morgue's secrets, the more disturbing the picture became. His nightmares worsened, filled with visions of cosmic rituals and a relentless darkness that consumed the entire town. One evening, he happened upon a secluded clearing near the town's edge. To his horror, he found the same unsettling symbols from his nightmares etched into the soil. His breath hitched as the grim realization set in. The morgue was not merely dispatching the dead, but conducting something far more ominous. Despite the dread that gnawed at his sanity, he knew he couldn't turn away. The chilling tableau of the morgue and its sinister proceedings was unraveling before him, a nightmare reality he could not deny. He had become a solitary torchbearer in the consuming darkness, his world shrinking to the periphery of this haunting narrative. Under the pall of an overcast night, the world seemed to hold its breath. The town of Maran, once a beacon of simplicity, lay shrouded in an oppressive silence. Jonah, a solitary figure against the backdrop of dim streetlights, made his way towards the morgue, his heart echoing the ominous toll of a distant bell. The morgue stood, a silent harbinger of the unfolding horror, its frost-laden facade glaring in the moonlight. He entered its cold embrace, the door groaning in protest. The chill of the room penetrated his coat, wrapping around his soul. The scent of formaldehyde, now tainted with a metallic undertone, invaded his senses. The dimly lit interior revealed the familiar sight of lifeless bodies under the spectral glow of overhead lights. Rows of steel gurneys stood like tombstones in a graveyard of forgotten stories. But tonight, he was not alone in this crypt of the departed. In the center of the room, bathed in an unholy glow, stood Reeves. His face, usually a picture of professional detachment, was now twisted into an expression of dread and fervor. He was reciting an incantation, his voice barely above a whisper, yet echoing in the silence. Around him, etched into the floor, were the same cryptic symbols Jonah had discovered in the clearing. He watched, his heart pounding in his chest, as Reeves lifted a scalpel. The metallic glint of the instrument seemed out of place, an unholy tool in an ancient ritual. As the blade descended onto the body, a seismic shudder ran through the building. The shadows lengthened, twisting and turning as if alive. Suddenly, Jonas felt a disorienting lurch, as if the room itself had spun. His eyes widened as the walls of the morgue seemed to peel away, revealing an impossible vista of swirling galaxies, nebulous clouds of cosmic dust, and an abyssal darkness that seemed to go on forever. At that moment, he understood. The morgue was not just a place for the dead. It was a conduit, a bridge between this earthly realm and an unimaginable expanse of cosmic horror. He was not just seeing it, he was experiencing it, drawn into an existence that transcended time and space. The feeling was terrifying, exhilarating, and overwhelmingly lonely. Suddenly, the cosmic vista faded, the walls of the morgue snapped back into place, and he found himself standing alone in the sterile room. Reeves was gone, vanished as if he had never existed. He staggered out of the morgue, the chill of the early dawn air hitting his face. The familiar scent of dew-soaked earth felt foreign, as did the sight of the quaint houses of Maran under the breaking dawn. He had journeyed into the heart of darkness and emerged changed. He stood alone, looking at the morgue, a quiet monument of his terrifying journey. His quiet life in Maran had been a veil, now lifted, revealing the cosmic horror that lurked beneath. As the sun peeked over the horizon, he turned away, a solitary figure bearing the burden of an unimaginable truth, forever changed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like it and subscribe to our channel, where you can find more similar stories, and click on the bell icon to never miss one. There is plenty more cosmic horror to come from the Eldritch Tales Factory. Stay tuned, and until next time.